Hello and welcome to Chat GCP, a medical science, clinical research and commercialization podcast, and I'm your host, Charles Beasley. On today's episode, we have Hanie Yee. Hanie is the COO of Alimetry, a medical device startup company developing non-invasive diagnostic methods for gastric diseases, as well as a committee chair for the Return on Science Medical and Surgical Investment Committee.
That's right.
Wow, I got through that. I'm actually very proud of myself. Great to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you.
You've been very busy of late. I saw on LinkedIn that you'd been traveling back and forth from America and around all the place. What was that all about?
I was very fortunate and privileged to be invited to be part of the NZTE BBD tour, which is Better by Design study tour. And that is when NZTE gets a group of companies, New Zealand-based companies, who are either in the US or scaling in the US or entering the market. It's a very customer-focused, customer-centric view of design. And the idea of it is to go and learn from those who are based in the US. So we had the opportunity to go into, I think, 12 different headquarters of big and super big and not super big businesses in the US and speak to the founders, senior leadership team, many of which were Kiwis. So that was pretty cool. And learn from them. It was amazing how generous they were with their time, with their experiences, and completely vulnerable in terms of the trials and tribulations that they've gone through, and sharing that experience with us.
That's fantastic. Now, did you bring, what were the main lessons learned that you brought back to apply in your maybe current role or in Alimetry?
Ooh, plenty actually. One of which was don't stand in your own way. So this is the one that I've really taken to heart. And one of the other ones where when the business is growing at a phenomenal space, which we in Alimetry I can relate to, you always have to keep an eye on the culture and make sure that you're scaling culture with the business itself. A lot easier said than done. I'm still figuring out how to do that. We talked a lot about the 10x mindset, and that if you're in the US specifically, because that was a theme of the whole trip, you really need to be in there and be in there. You need to commit and be in, everything, put it in. There was a lot around design-led, how all value is perceived value, and the value of brand and how it all comes back to the brand. Everything else and the brand comes through whatever the business does. So, yeah, I can talk for days about what we learned, not just from the businesses, I should add, but from all the other people that were on the tour. So we had amazing trips to the headquarters, but we had a lot of bus trips, as you can imagine, in Manhattan and in San Francisco. So it's a great opportunity to learn from other New Zealand businesses that I was there with.
Yeah, it's fantastic that that is even a thing. I mean, it's getting that direct access to people that have gone through the gambit of commercialization.
Totally.
Some successes, I imagine some not so successes, but there's all learning opportunities there.
Right.
And unless we kind of get exposure to that and bring it back to New Zealand, we're not going to be able to apply any of those lessons learned.
Totally. And it's just like you're either not really doing good business if you haven't gone through ups and downs, And these businesses that we had the opportunity to meet with, some of them are in different parts of that cycle. So some are still going up really high. Some have been hit by COVID, who hasn't. Some have come down and now going back up again. So everybody has scar marks that they want to discuss. And that was one of the things, their advice for the Kiwi businesses was wear those failure experiences as badges of success. They want to talk about this and they celebrate success, but they also talk about failures very openly.
Yes.
And that was a cultural difference between how the Americans approach it versus the Kiwis.
Yeah, that's interesting. The culture is so important. I mean, in New Zealand, we often hear about the tall poppy syndrome. I mean, and I think the Brits, they have the crabs in a bucket syndrome, which I think is a little bit more colourful, but probably more or less the same as the idea that as soon as someone starts, moving out of the bucket, and the other crabs pull them down. But that's something that the Americans don't really have.
They're very
Yeah.
proud people. And again, something that one person said on the trip was people here are very proud of what they do and the title that they have. In New Zealand, generically, we're kind of like, oh, I lead this or I'm the head of. But, if you talk to an American, they're like, I'm the senior VP of XYZ.
There's a few more layers over there.
Yes, but they've worked really hard to get there. Not that the Kiwis haven't, but the Kiwis are not so much about talking about it. Whereas the Americans are like, I've worked hard. I'm going to tell you how I got here, and it's on point, So, there's cultural differences. Not that one is good or bad. It was just interesting to observe and compare.
Absolutely. So why don't we take a step back and talk about how you got to your current position. So I know you're incredibly busy and very successful in your career, but you started out more or less in clinical research. Is that correct? And then moved your way into a bit of the business side of things, and now what you're doing is kind of the umbrella of both those worlds.
Yes.
Clinical research is not like a obvious career path for most people. I mean, I work in clinical research. I got there more or less by accident, found there with my first job, and very grateful that I did because it's put me on the current career trajectory. Obviously, not podcasting notwithstanding. But how did you make your start in clinical research?
Completely by accident.
Right.
I don't think anyone gets into it intentionally. No, actually, some people might do. No, mine was 100% by accident. Right. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I genuinely didn't. I tried to study marine biology. I'm a molecular biologist by training, so I studied in genetics. Then I really didn't like working in a lab, so I wanted to do marine biology. I am also a scuba diver, but I get really bad seasick, so I can't really spend a lot of time on boats. So that was out. Then I learned about human circadian rhythms and biological clocks, and I thought this is amazing. I'm a curious person by nature, so that's kind of very important in terms of how my career has shaped. I really have followed my curiosity, not necessarily talent or anything. So that circadian rhythm thing led me to the person in New Zealand that was doing research in that area, and they were working in the medical school. And so I followed that path to get to work with that person. When I did my master's, I got my master's in medical sciences in anesthesiology. And because I had worked with that person on a project that they had, and there was a drug company that was sponsoring that trial. I was just collecting data. When my master's finished, the same drug company came and said that they will pay me to do what I was doing yesterday for free. I don't think I thought at all about that decision. I just
Straight
said
away.
Yes. Yeah, I'm going to go from a very poor student to getting paid for what I was doing. Sign me up. I went back to the United States where I was based out of, and I think it was just when you show a little bit of competence, you keep on going up the ladder, and in the United States it's relatively easy to do so. You have a lot of opportunity. So I kept on going, and that was mainly through different drug companies. I was working for a CRO, contract research organization, but I was being seconded to different pharma companies. So I worked with Sanofi Pasteur, I worked with Takeda, and then towards the end I worked with Genetech. Came back to New Zealand, this time for completely personal and family reasons. I married someone who was Kiwi, and transferred my job into to New Zealand, and then my world of clinical research just shrunk into tiny. So that was the very long answer to your question. That's how I got into it and kind of carried on.
Yeah, so along the way, you collected, time working at some of the huge companies. Takeda, Genetech is, like the darling of the biotech industry.
Yeah.
They were on the forefront of a lot of the medicine 2.0, shall we say, or 2.5 drugs that are like biologics and that kind of thing. Right, so coming to little old New Zealand, you mentioned that the industry shrinks quite a lot. I mean, it's grown probably since you've been...
Oh, hugely, yes.
But, what was that like? I mean, you've worked at these big companies, and now you're, is it fair to say big fish in a small pond?
Oh, totally. Yeah. It is very eye opening when you come into New Zealand. The quality of the research was on par, if not better, in some ways, of what I was doing previously. But the glass ceiling or whatever you want to call it just dropped majorly. For me, within the company that I was with, they also were going through a big shift of move and centralizing or decentralizing, whatever they were calling it at the time, to shift mainly everything being governed by overseas parts of the company. And we were just kind of taking what was given to us and applying it. Personally, that wasn't something I was inspired to do. And I went right back to where my roots were and I had done my studies. So clinical, sleep and circadian rhythms. And at the time, Fisher Paykel Healthcare had a sleep division, and I was lucky enough to join Fisher Paykel Healthcare.
Excellent. So that curiosity that you always had served you very well in the past, led you to pivot to medical device development at Fisher Paykel? Yeah.
Totally. And the curiosity is a great thing when it takes, but I kind of need the curiosity to balance with thinking things through, and that has not been the case in my career. So I sometimes just go, this is interesting, I'll go and do it and see what happens. So that was big at the time for me, because I left the world of biotech and pharma, which I had spent all of my career in, to go to medical devices. We're talking back in 2010. So, and medical devices in New Zealand at that point had not much infrastructure regulation worldwide, I should say, let alone in New Zealand. Fisher Paykel was a great company. I was happy to be back again at a headquarters where decisions are made, where a strategy is designed. That was exciting. But for me, it actually felt like working in a very small company at the time, because it's all relative, right?
Yes,
You just go from I was at a big pharma in the US with red tape coming out of every single corner to medical devices, which by nature has a lot less red tape, it's growing now, but at the time, and then a New Zealand company that has a very different approach to all of that. So compared to the Swiss guys. So that was different. Loved my role, and I realized that the beauty of the role that I was in now was that it wasn't siloed to the corner and taking you away from the market, so to speak. It was very much a clinical and marketing role. So I spent a lot of my time, maybe half the year, traveling and being in the field with the sales guys, visiting customers, which is where I kind of got a feel for, this is kind of where I want to go next.
Yeah. Nice. So that, good exposure. Not by virtue of design, but good exposure, getting into the marketing thing, the business side of things, strategy, operations, and that was like the segue right into now where you are now.
That and kind of a mini MBA in the middle.
Yes. Oh, right, yeah. That's quite an important.
Yes.
Interesting. A mini MBA, was it executive MBA? Or?
It was, yes. So through the Darden Business School, University of Virginia.
Yeah. I always find it a bit interesting when, apologies if anyone has done this themselves, but you do an MBA straight out of completely like a BSc, and you have no real world understanding.
Totally.
There's no substitute for real world knowledge and exposure to how business is actually really done.
I agree, because I did the same thing. But
it would be nice to get those 3 letters.
For sure.
But later, but not straight away. So what was the inspiration? So you're at, Fisher & Paykel, clinical side of things, bit of marketing, bit of business development. What was the eureka moment that made you want to jump ship into Alimetry? Or how did that come about? What was the genesis? Because you worked with them since 2020, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So doing this MBA, you do so many different modules around different things, right? And the one part that I literally, and I have to say it had been over 15 years that I had studied, structurally studied anything. So initially it was just like a deer in the headlights going, why did I do this with 2 kids under 3?
Oh my goodness.
But when you kind of get in, and I got to the part that we were talking about entrepreneurship, about, setting up businesses, running businesses, and I couldn't put it down. It was like, it doesn't matter how tired I was. I just wanted to learn more. And being exposed to a lot of, I have to say that I come from a family that has, my father was a serial entrepreneur. So it was the dinner discussions were always business. It wasn't about many other things.
Yeah.
So that has always been part of my life, but also being able to learn a little bit more and getting the excitement and the curiosity now with the tiny bit of competence that you think now you understand it better. That was the main thing. So those were the two catalysts. That coming back from my second maternity, as I mentioned, it was like, okay, what I want to do next, I probably can't do in a corporate, So it's a great company, love it, love the people, but it's not going to give me where I want to satisfy myself. Now, timing, they say, is everything. Not in this case. Yeah. So because I had just come back, at the time, my boss, my manager, said to me that I had the opportunity. There's this little thing happening called COVID, and there was like a crisis management team, and there were different parts of it. And since I'm really into starting things and running things, do I want to get involved? It's probably a 3-4 week gig that it will come to an end, and I welcome that. And I loved it. It was 18-hour days. It was insane. But
with two kids under 3.
Oh yeah, wow. Yeah. and Hanie, who just left. But anyway, so I got the most amount of job satisfaction out of that, and I knew that, okay, this tells me, and I'm a slow learner. However, this is telling me that that's where I like building it, setting it up, growing it is where I really want to be. Caveat is I knew Greg for about 1.5 years prior to that point, and we'd been in touch. Greg was at his other company that he had started, the Insights company, which I'm sure he may have spoken about. So him and I were in touch, and I knew that Alimetry was becoming a thing. And yes, I did resign on the eve of the second lockdown, and my boss asked me if I was having a mental breakdown, because he just asked me, where are you going? And I said, to a startup. Do they have
in
funding?
the middle of COVID?
In the middle of COVID. Everyone's losing their jobs. Everyone's just holding on to what they have. And Fisher Paykel Healthcare is the only company that is doing so amazingly well. And where are you going?
Yeah.
A startup. Do they have funding? No. Why? And I said, well, why not? I knew if I was going to do it, if I did it then and it worked out, it would work any other time.
Right.
My appetite for risk-taking is never going to get more. And I just know myself. I had to scratch the itch, so to speak.
Yeah. So if you're looking at a stat sheet of yourself as a person, it might be risk maxed out, risk appetite maxed out, competency maxed out, curiosity maxed out. I mean, all of these things, and you've got the underpinning of your previous career in clinical research and your EMBA. Yeah, I mean, like, who cares about COVID, right? Don't need job security. Don't.
Kind of. We did one of those. I do not believe in personality tests, but for all intents and purposes, we actually want an potential investor once asked us to do a personality test, and they would give you a one-word kind of like the type of personality you're. Yeah. I was a maverick. I was. Maverick. I don't think anybody in the company was surprised. They're all like, ha ha ha, yes.
Yeah. Gosh, I don't think I know very many people that I would associate with being mavericks in the clinical research industry. So maybe
that's why it left.
Yeah, the writing was on the wall from the beginning. That's such a cool story. So, obviously the funding came through for Alimetry, and the story has just progressed since then. Totally. So that's been exciting. What have been some of the decisions that you've had to make in your capacity as COO that have really excited you? I mean, it's very clear that you're really passionate about what you do. I mean, that's obvious. You're a very curious person. But what was the thing that really solidified that, yes, you've made the right decision, and I can't wait for all these other decisions that I have to make in this company?
Okay. I want to start with saying I wasn't playing Russian roulette. And it was important to mention that I knew Greg. Yeah. I know how solid he is as a scientist, and how much work he had done into this. So it wasn't a completely random risk I was taking. I knew he was going to successful. I wanted to be part of that success. So I want to say this. The science is there, the technology is there, and I've done my own due diligence when I wanted to join the company on that. The most exciting part that I've had the privilege of making some important decisions on is building the team, because at the end of the day, it's a group of people that come together that make decisions that either make a business successful or not, or otherwise. And it's independent of, a lot of it is somewhat independent of how good the technology is. And we have, hand on heart, I can say, but I'm biased, the best team I've ever worked with. I've had, I can see my finger marks around the team in terms of how I brought the team together. So that makes me both very proud and privileged to be amongst them and be able to go every day and learn from them.
Yeah. Did you have a idea in mind when you were hiring people and creating the team, what you want this team to look like from the very outset, or are you building the picture piece by piece?
It is a piece by piece, especially in a startup world. You don't have the money to create a big team. But yes, the one advice that I've been given is when you're trying to build a team, look around the table, you should not be able to see yourself. So it's building capabilities, bringing in people who complement you, who challenge you, but don't reflect exactly who you are. So that's been a very intentional part of building this team. We have very strong debates, ones that I come out feeling that I've actually grown a little bit, as well as my ego is completely shattered, but that's okay. But that's my philosophy in building a team is don't replicate yourself. Bring in people that can stretch you and grow you.
Yeah, because that would be the danger or the default that a lot of people would do. They would hire people that reflect the same values or the same personality types, or are just going to be in agreement with every decision that is made. But only through really good discussion and discourse and maybe a little bit of debate do you arrive at the best outcome for the company, right? No one person is a complete, fundamentally unflawed fount of knowledge or an oracle that can make the best decision. Totally. So you need a team that can actually bounce off each other rather than just say, yep.
Yes, and it is about that diversity and the inclusion part. And I know the DEI word gets used or sometimes overused in today's world, but when it comes to starting from scratch, you've got a blank canvas, you can paint it. And it is a responsibility and a privilege not to be taken lightly. And that's when you can implement. Sometimes it's really hard. So it is really, really hard. So we've had, we've open positions that we're hiring for. And we've really tried to, debate it amongst ourselves of what are we looking for? Of course, you want to give the job to the right person, but you also want to make sure that the people who are already there are stretched a little bit. I don't believe in team fit. More, I try to go a team complement, because a team complement can grow the size of the pie rather than just fit into the slot that you create for it.
Oh, I like that. That's very cool. Have there been any big decisions that you've maybe regretted making?
Daily. Like today or in general?
And no. Because obviously, like no one's perfect, but you have to be comfortable with taking on a bit of risk. You need to be and weather the consequences. Because so have there anything and with the value of hindsight is always 20/20.
Totally.
Any lessons that you've learned or any decisions that maybe looking back on it?
I'm serious, especially in a startup life. You go through that hourly, daily situation, and because you're kind of building the tracks as the train's going 100 miles an hour. And that's the part that I love. It scares me the most also, but I've never learned in such a steep, it's been the steepest learning curve of my life. The one thing that has empowered me through this journey and I treasure the most is the trust that I've received from Greg and Armin, the co-founders, mainly Greg, because he's obviously my boss. But I have tried my best to channel that across the team or down sideways, whichever way I can put that through. Because I remember when I first started at Alimetry, everything I, just by virtue of what I had done previously, I was asking if he's okay with it, and he just didn't have time.
Sure.
You know, and that's what he said to me. He's like, "You're here to make decisions. Just don't keep on asking if it's right or wrong." And I was completely outside of my comfort zone. I wasn't marketing a product at the time. I wasn't selling anything or writing off, protocols or CRFs. I was making financial decisions. I was hiring people. I genuinely am scared of HR. I was HR. But that trust meant that I made decisions based on decisions you make with information in a time scale, right? So if I make the same decision today, I either haven't grown or learned from what happened. So there's very few that I would go perfect decision.
Right. Yeah.
Most of the time I'm like, oh, okay. But I'm cool to apologize for it.
No, that's good. I mean, I don't think you can call yourself a good leader if you can't say, oh, I had the opportunity to make that decision again. I would do, if you don't say I would do it perhaps differently in a few different times. Like you say, you haven't grown, you haven't learned, you haven't developed. At the end, well, I suppose in business, particularly in startup and business and in our own roles, it's have you heard the phrase, it's an infinite game? Like there's no set defined endpoint. You're not going to arrive at some day and go, haha, I've made it and I'm this perfectly formed, homunculus.
No,
like
I
it's
wish there
infinite.
was. I wish there was. It would make life a lot easier for our team, to be honest, because every time we're like, okay, this is our next milestone. We're going for it. And then everyone gets there tired and you're like, so actually we're going for there, So no, that's totally it. And I probably regret everything I haven't done.
So it's the cost of not making a decision kind of thing, or
doing more, doing it differently.
Doing more.
Yeah.
Working more 80 nowadays.
No, I didn't say that. No, but in terms of do I regret any decisions I made? No, I always look back and be like, what else I could have done? The stuff that I didn't do is the stuff that I would regret. Yeah.
Oh no, that's great. Have there been any kind of forks in the road for you, particularly that you can say, oh man, that was a great decision? Obviously, jumping in, the funding. Any other big pivotal moments for you?
There's
Don't
a
say
lot.
daily.
Okay, monthly, weekly. Honestly, it's watching how we all go through these motions, right?
Yeah.
It is not for the faint-hearted. I have a lot of especially younger people than myself, that come and ask me whether they should join a startup. It's not for everyone.
Yeah.
It is not. If you want certainty, if you want to know exactly what your next week or month or year would be like, don't join a startup. It will do horrible things to your psyche. But if you're like, I just want to be on here as a ride, and I will tell you something I normally tell other people, corporates, you're on an oil tanker. It goes from A to B. You're highly likely, the thing inside it is very valuable. So you're very likely to get to your destination. It is very safe, but it's boring, right? For some people, for some personalities. Yep. It's like watching paint dry. And when you want to turn, 5 degrees this way, left, whatever that is on a ship, 10 people have to yell out the same thing. And you're like, what was my contribution? So you're not sure. Startup is jumping on a jet ski. You're going fast, you're going slow, you turn. However, any second, there's a chance that you're going to run out of fuel and have to swim to shore. Yeah. But if you're good at swimming and you're at least confident that you can swim, and somebody told you that there was a life jacket in there somewhere, that's more towards my psyche, then you're like, I'm not going to miss out on the chance, right?
Yeah. How much fun is a jet ski versus an oil tanker?
Well, exactly, but it depends on how much safety you need. If you have a big book that you want to read, then you'll be looking forward to the comfort of an oil tanker. You're not going to be on a jet ski, are you?
Yeah.
But it is one of those things that there's always forks at the road, and you take one, and there's been some that we went, phew, that was a good decision. And there are ones that were all of us looking at each other, like, anybody going to say that was a terrible decision? Let's not do it again. Let's learn from it.
Yeah.
And again, I come back to the team. It's when there's really late nights, there's really long days, there's tough meetings and tough milestones that we have to meet, and you have to raise capital. But then people just hold each other, and it's also a product of age and stage of the company. You know, if we can do this because we're at 50 odd people, when we're at 5,000, then it's my challenge to scale the culture with the business.
Yeah, and in the last 3 years, has the company grown in such a way that your role has changed as well over time?
Yeah, I don't get to order the snacks anymore. I loved doing that because it was everything I wanted to eat. Yes, it has. It has. Absolutely, it has. There's a lot more people within the team, which is amazing. And they are subject matter experts, which makes me a lot more comfortable because it was a lot of calls we were making just because there was no one else to do it. Now I have subject matter experts within those areas that I can rely upon, learn from. But sometimes, unfortunately, I don't get a say anymore. I just get to nod in approval.
It's palpable the amount of passion you have for what you're doing is really coming through, and it's really inspiring because a bit like what we alluded to earlier with the culture that we have in New Zealand, tall poppy syndrome, successful people aren't always celebrated. I mean, I think that is changing. The winds of change are really turning. I think in the last 20 years, it's a little bit more evident that the winners are really celebrated a bit more than they were previously, which is awesome to see. But what you're doing as well outside of your role as the Chief Operating Officer with these investment committees is fantastic because that is fostering the next generation of companies, the next generation of entrepreneurs that will be involved in this space. You kind of see it as a bit like a chain of succession. You've got big companies that show that we do have enough of an infrastructure here that startup companies could be successful.
Yes.
And then with a few successful startups, then other people go, hang on, I could do that. And then we are unlocking the talent, the curiosity, the potential expertise of our people. It's a bit like if you don't see it, you can't emulate it. You don't know that's offer available to you, and you might take your very expensive education elsewhere.
Yes.
So what led you to be involved in these investment committees and your other work in this kind of like next generation fostering?
Totally. Again, curiosity.
Yeah.
I had heard about return on science. I'm going to refer to it as ROS, sorry, because return on science takes a long time. So I had heard about ROS, and I was really, really curious to understand what they do because it sounded really cool. And it was right about the same time that I'd just done my MBA, so it was like I just wanted to learn more. And to be honest, when the first meeting I went to, I sat in as a guest, and talk about imposter syndrome. I was just like, okay, I'm just going to exit quietly, stage left. I was literally blown away by the amount of talent that came through in terms of the projects that we saw that each at every meeting, there's projects that come and present to you. So they pitch, if you like. And then there's a group of subject matter experts, again, as committee members sitting around the table. I was just like, I just want to just stay here, like, I don't know.
Bask in the glory of these people.
In the background. And then they don't see me because my jaw was literally dropping, like looking everyone on LinkedIn and going, oh my God. So then I got invited to join one of the committees. So the surgical and MedTech and surgical. I couldn't believe it the first day. I was like, I'm not even going to ask a question. But one thing that I learned, again, that is the most amount of fun I have on a regular basis. It's one of the things that my brain is so stimulated. I'm normally not very good at focusing, but in those meetings, you're so taken by everything that is happening at the same time. That you just don't have any other thing to do, but just like my eyes are like normally like this. It is so cool to see the level of talent, the level of innovation, the level of passion that is brought into the room through. These are mainly university projects. So it's either spin-out companies that have gone out of the university, and it's not just University of Auckland. Return on Science is part of Uni Services or works with Uni Services, but we see projects from Otago, Victoria, Canterbury, so all over the place. And or academics. So it's either ex-students, current students, academics, or companies. And just seeing them, how they've gone about solving a problem. And you kind of go, oh my God, my brain just does not think that way. But it's amazing to hear what you've done. And then hearing and getting feedback from the committee members around the table and sharing graciously so much of their experience, their insights. And, we're all better if we're better connected. And that's a big part of this, is not just giving you feedback in terms of Charles' amazing technology, maybe screw that, that one tighter.
Yep.
It's around, I know someone who knows someone, you should talk to that person. And that will take a company, a project into completely new heights that they could potentially not even imagine before they came.
Yeah. You're only as good as your network, right? And these
100%.
particularly in startup. So as have over the course of your involvement in these committees, has the network grown? Is the ecosystem getting bigger, more supported?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes. MedTech is actually a thing now, I am not joking. It is getting more and more. We slide plug for Alimetry, but we cleaned out at the High Tech Awards 3 years ago, and you saw the companies that the high tech companies that were coming through, and MedTech was not necessarily always represented.
Yep.
We did amazingly well. Yes, it was a fabulous night. But ever since then, like last year, I saw Formas took 2 as well. And it's just the way that the ecosystem is growing. And like from my previous employer, which was Fisher Paykel Healthcare, there was a time that Fisher Paykel was the only one here, and then there was Aroa Biosurgery. And then now there's like all these other smaller companies all coming through. It's back to what you were saying. If you can't see it, you can't believe it, and you don't aspire to be it. And now, because there's more steps in the way, others who are coming through are seeing that you don't have to overnight become Fisher & Paykel Healthcare. You can't. Yeah. There's a lot of things that have to happen in your favor. But at the same time, these guys are doing it. So I'm going to go talk to Alimetry, who are like a drop in the bucket in comparison. But they've taken that risk. They're on that journey. What can I learn about them? And the thing is that the ecosystem is just so collegial, so supportive. The network of friends that we have is just, or colleagues, is amazing. And, if I have someone, I've had many chats with a group of us that have been spun out through the ABI, the Auckland Bioengineering Institute. And we're just like, who are you using for this? How are you managing that, And it's about that sharing, yeah. Because when you're at the end of the world, literally,
yes,
and you're aiming to go into the other hemisphere, you can't just rely on your tech. There's a lot more that you need.
So it's almost as though in the last 5-10 years we've reached like a critical mass where this ecosystem is sufficiently well furnished with expertise and capital and know-how that we can actually be successful in spinning out these companies a bit more than historically.
Yes, there's definitely a lot more capital. There's always money here in New Zealand, but there's what I would like to term as a smart money, the money that not only brings capital but can open doors for you, and that has totally changed in the last 3 to 5 years, I would say. Yeah. So I can now see the companies that are coming in and are interested that were not here 10 years ago, for sure. But there is a lot more room for that expertise to grow. And that's my passion project in terms of, I know it sounds really cliche, but New Zealand is more than a pretty postcard. When you come and be a fly in the wall in one of my investment meetings, is you're blown away,
Yeah.
and you're like, sheesh, we're like totally can be Silicon Valley, if not more. We just need resources to help grow this raw, what I would like to call raw talent. There's a lot of people doing amazing work to support this, things like Return on Science, but there's Titoki Matiora
Yep.
that Daiso is doing. Callahan is helping a lot. NZT is an amazing ambassador for us. So there's a lot happening, but there's a lot more that can happen.
Yeah. What are some of the risks and opportunities that you see for the wider ecosystem? I mean, I think from my perspective, and again, I'm not particularly involved in any of this, aside from the podcast and talking to amazing people like yourself, but the brain drain is probably a real thing. It's a lot easier now to just up and leave. I mean, you get educated and then go, you know what, I'm going to go to Australia. That's a 3-hour plane right away, and they'll let me in without even looking at my driver's license kind of thing.
Yeah.
Are there any, and maybe demographic shifts as well? That's also playing a role, I can imagine. But from your perspective, what are the main risks that you're seeing for this ecosystem to kind of come off that awesome trajectory that we're on?
Yeah, so COVID was horrendous for everybody, but there was some silver linings. A lot of Kiwis came home for a duration. They didn't necessarily stay here, but they came back, and they brought back that amazing international experience, insights, views of the world that has been extraordinary to help shift the bar of what you want to be to what you can be, what you dream about of being. So that's an opportunity. But a lot of people have equally left. We have amazing talent, but we also need more to feed these companies to grow and give them the resources. So it's just not capital. I need to bring in a certain demographic of talent. It's an engineer, for example, with certain capabilities, and if we're not pumping them enough quickly through the systems here or through the universities, I may need to bring someone from overseas, and I'm not gonna use, you're gonna have a beautiful house in Auckland, or you're never ever be able to buy a house in Auckland. I'm not gonna politicize this discussion, but I need to find ways that I can attract talent and keep them here. To your point exactly, to be able to grow something that is going to create a future for my kids, that they aspire to stay here, and they don't constantly go, well, I'm just going to finish my university and I'm going to look for a job, etc. So there are risks, but I think the people who are in it right now have all got the right intentions to take that further and grow that. One thing I want to say is, one thing I'm very proud of to see changing as a feminist is the change in MedTech, how MedTech in New Zealand looks like. In Alimetry, again, we are very passionate about making sure that the diversity is represented, and I can see that in the ecosystem happening. It's not just about females or Maori being involved, it's that everyone who brings an element of that diversity with them creates a different point of view that can take us to where we weren't before but could get to in the future.
Yeah, so it's like diversity of experience, background, and point of view.
Yeah.
To be able to critically analyze something in a different vein that would build a
100%.
good picture. Yeah. I'm encouraged by what you're doing at Alimetry and the Return on Science, because a bit like what you said, I have a young daughter. I want the New Zealand that she's going to grow up in to eventually be an adult and live the rest of her life to be a really successful one. And I do feel as though culturally kind of fall back on a bit of tourism and a bit of farming, and we do have the potential. I mean, you said this, to be like a APAC version of Silicon Valley. I mean, if so much headway has been made in 5-10 years in this space, can you just imagine if you extrapolate that continued progress for another 5, 10, 15? It'd be fantastic. Where can people go if they want to find out more about participating in the Return on Science, or if they want to get involved in those kind of committees as a participant, but maybe if they have expertise and they hadn't thought about maybe lending their their talents?
One, if you're a student, definitely look up Momentum. So that's another student-led committee, and we always are looking for students, because I talked about everyone who I see and have experience, but my gosh, I sit on the Momentum committee myself, and they have this beautiful, raw, out-of-the-box thinking that is not yet shaped by limitations and red tape that it's ingrained in me.
Yeah.
And whenever they say something or ask a question, and you're like, whoa. So look it up online on Return on Science, Momentum committees, and I'm sure you can either apply to become part of them, or if you just want to attend, there's a due diligence process you will have to go through. You can't just jump in and listen to someone's IP being discussed. But I know for a fact that the team there, Graham Scown and his team, are always looking for curious, passionate people to join.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Because, yeah, I mean, it's not going to grow in a vacuum, you know.
No.
The industry has got to be people that are willing to give up their time and effort and expertise and knowledge to pass on the torch again, and what's in the next chain of succession.
I want to turn the tables around, though. I want to say that for me, I also have, again, a huge privilege to be invited to do some guest lectures at the university, especially for the Masters of something in Enterprise.
Bioscience
and Enterprise, thank you. I always say that, ask to have a coffee. Like, everybody drinks coffee or tea or a beverage. And personally, I want to pass my knowledge on, because I'm proud of how I've gained it. So even if it is through bad decisions, reach out. LinkedIn is an amazing platform that is so underutilized. I'm not looking for you to send me a 5-page CV and a massive email. Just send me one-liner. Tell me why you're interested to talk to me, or have a coffee. Let's catch up. It doesn't have to be super formal. I got through that myself. I found someone's, like, I had a colleague, and her mom sounded like a super cool individual. So I just asked her if she would meet me for coffee, and asked her to introduce me to 3 people that I should speak to. And it started from there. Yeah. So it doesn't have to be formal. Reach out, utilize LinkedIn, cold call people that you think you want to chat to. And people are super gracious and very generous with their time.
That's so awesome to see, because I think that is another cultural shift that's probably happening. I think people, myself included, occasionally like, no, I've worked so hard for this, I don't want to give this away. People also need to learn, the hard way too, like I had to, for whatever reason it is. But that's a very inefficient way of doing it. And if you've got incredibly passionate people like yourself that are willing to pass on knowledge, expertise, and maybe give a little hand up to the next opportunity for someone, it's going to make us all better.
Yes, I've got a young daughter, and I most definitely do not want her to go through the things I did have to go through to get to this point. Yeah. So my passion, and I'm going to sound like an old nana now, but at my age, that's my ultimate goal, is to be part of building the next, the future of a country that I'm proud to call home, and I want my kids to grow up in.
Absolutely, I love it. So, big picture, where to next for yourself, Alimetry, and some of these committees?
We have just, if Greg watches this, he's going to cringe. We've just been called by someone, I can't even remember the name, a Sunicorn, soon to be unicorn. Oh. That's Alimetry, not me. Yeah. No intention to becoming a unicorn. So yeah, that's what's next for Alimetry. Just new heights. Yeah. Things that we didn't think.
Someone called you the next Fisher Paykel. Alimetry, that is.
That's not.
Fisher Paykel's like a $15 billion.
Yeah, we inspire to be
sure.
Fisher Paykel. But I think it was Tarkson that called us Sunicorns. So we're next for Alimetry, just the next milestone, if you ask me today. But sure. In general, is we want to. Our motto is to democratize gastric health. It's Greg's vision. It's the reason I joined Alimetry, and I've put my blinkers on to achieve that for us as a company. And I can't do that unless I have the best team. And I would love to be able to be part of building that team.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I know a lot of people will get a lot out of this conversation. And it is really, really inspiring what you're doing, but Alimetry is doing in these committees for the future of the medtech industry in New Zealand. Again, we need high-value industries to have a good future here. And we can't do that just on farming and tourism alone. So kudos and thank you so much for your time and all the best.
Thanks, Charles. It's been a privilege to have this conversation with you and the opportunity to share the mic. Yes, I guess I would love to be in that situation. And if you're going to follow your curiosity, do your due diligence. Do a bit more thinking than I did, maybe, because some of those turns were quite tight.
Excellent.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Cheers.